Hi everyone, welcome to Netcode-Hub channel. Thank you for watching this video, and I believe this won't be the last video that you're going to watch. I'm going to see you again in another video, isn't it? That's right. This is Netcode-Hub channel, as you know already, and now this channel is all about using .NET framework to develop web app, mobile app, and desktop application using Blazor WebAssembly, Blazor server application, .NET MARI, and also .NET MARI Blazor Hybrid. If you want to have more videos on this, please check the playlist. We have a lot of videos over there. Now, in this video, we are going to talk about how to create generic repository pattern with UnitOfWork. Maybe if today is the first time of you hearing generic repository, don't worry. I'm going to explain this for you to understand. As always, I'll do my best for you to get this. Then the next question is, what are the objectives of this video? You must be able to do three things when you finish watching this video. First of all, you have to be able to create a generic repository. Second, you have to be able to create UnitOfWork. Now the third one is you have to be able to create controller. I believe for that you know it already, but you learn how to fuse the UnitOfWork into the controller so you can make a call in your API. As I said earlier on, I'll do my best to make this video simple and clear so that you need to watch another video for more explanation. This, we're going to cut it all. If you haven't subscribed to this channel, please do so. Click on the notification icon so you receive updates as soon as a new video drops. Like this video if this video touches your heart. You can also buy me coffee to support this channel grow. If you want to do that, please check the description. I have the link waiting for you. Alright, so let's dive into this. First of all, let's have a look with a generic repository. I tried to surf online to get a simple definition for that, and I got up this. Let me just put it down here. So what I got was, generic repositories are design patterns that aim to simplify the data access layer of a web application or web API by providing a generic interfaces for CRUD operations, and that is a create, read, update, and delete operation on any entity type. Generic repositories can reduce the amount of boilerplate code and improve the maintainability and also the testability of the web API. So this can also combine with the UnitOfWork pattern to manage transactions and ensure data consistency. That is what this generic repository is. Let's say it is a framework that you're going to create. Now, when you create this framework, any model or any entity that you want to use can use this framework. Okay, so it's like we are creating a general framework for that, and that is what this classify it as. Common methods. So you can see from here, it is saying that a generic repository usually defined as an interface that contains common methods. So all methods that we're going to be using or that we need in our models or in our API, we're going to put them into one as a base class. Then we're going to inherit from this base class. So we need not to create individual repository for each of the models. Let's give an example. Let's say you are in a company and you want to create a database on API. You have an employee, you have customers, you have others. Now you want to have customer API, or you want to have customer controller, you want to have other controller, you want to have employee controller. So this means that you have to create 3 repositories. That is, each contains the interface and 8 implementation, making 6. So 6 interfaces, 3 interfaces, and now 3 implementation classes. Now this is going to take a lot of time, okay, but they're going to have a similarity together. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to extract the similarity and now put them together. Then each of these module can inherit from the base one. That is all about generic repository. I believe this is clear. If the token is not getting you well, don't worry. When we get to the practical aspect, I bet you're going to understand this. So let's get going. But before that, let's see what you're going to do today. We're going to create 3 projects. It's all about web API. The first one is going to be the blank solution. Second part, you're going to add the API itself. That's a web API. We're going to also add the C# class library. we're going to name it as data access. Then we're going to create another class, name it as domain. The domain is going to handle all our modules and all our interfaces. Now the data access is going to handle a connection to the database, meaning it's going to have the implementation of the interfaces and it's going to have access to the database itself. Now the API is going to make a call to the domain interface, and now the domain interface also is going to make a call to the data access class to fetch data from the database. So that is all about what we're going to do today. So let's start by creating a new project. So you make sure that you've launched your Visual Studio 2022 or any other version. Then let's click on blank solution. You can just get it over here. So make a search solution and you can get it from this section. All right, so this is a solution. Now the name of this, we're going to name it as demo. Then a generic repository with UnitOfWork solution. When I'm done with this project, or when we are done, okay, so because I'm going to do it with you. When we are done, I'll put this to the GitHub, so you can just go in there and now clone this. But before you do that, check the video description. I'll put the link over there. So you can just click on it, go to GitHub, and now clone it over there. Please, when you go there, don't forget to start the project. It's very important as well. All right, now let's keep moving. So that's the solution name. You click on the create. And the first thing I'm going to do here is we're going to create an API. And we're going to name this as Company Management API. So right click on this solution, click on add, then new project, not new item. So new project, we're going to choose web API. If you can't find that, click on this, all project types, then web API, last part. So you can just click on that. Now let's name it as company management.api. So this is an API. We click on create. Now aside from this, we want to create a data access layer. So with this access layer, it's going to handle all the definitions or the implementations of this project, right? So let's see. So we have the API set. Now let's right click on the same solution. And now let's add the new project. And this time around, we are going for C# class library. If you can't find it, click on this and library, because you're going to see this C# class over here. So let's give it the name as company management.data access. So let's add that. The same framework of 7.0, click on create. Now we need to add the last one, and that's going to be the domain, which is going to handle all our modules and all our interfaces. So right click on the same project and let's add a new one. And you know, we are going for class library. So click on that and you give it a name with the domain. Let's click on next. The same framework version 7.0, click on create. All right, so now we can just make a cleanup to the default one that we have, all the classes. Let's remove them. Let's remove the weather forecast. Let's remove the controller too. Yes, so I believe that is it. Okay, that's right. Now what we're going to do here is let's connect them together. So this is what we're going to do. The API is going to demand data from the domain, right? And also the data access, because here it needs the AppDB context, and that's going to happen from this data access. So let's open this. Now let's dependencies right click and now add project references. Let's select the two. So it's going to use the two here for data communication. Now the next one is when you come to this data access, it's going to use this domain, because this domain is going to handle our modules and our interfaces. So we can add this to this part here, right? So let's click on this dependencies, add project reference. Make sure you add the domain to that. Okay, so we have a project being linked successfully. Now the next thing to do here is let's build this project to see if everything is working. Then we can move on working on the domain projects. So what we need to do here is to just right click and now get build solution. Now we check down here to see if everything is working as expected. So you could see that we have the project being built and 3 succeeded, meaning we have 3 projects now, each is built. That's why we have the 3 succeeded in all. Let's get going by installing some projects. Is it project NuGet packages that we're going to be using. So we need to install them to the data access and also the API, because that is where the main thing, the heart is going to be, right? data communication is going to happen between the data access and also the controller. So let's open this. On this data access, right click, and now let's add. Is it add? So we go to manage NuGet packages. So we need to install EF Core and also EF Core server and now tools. So we have this EF Core here. Let's get it installed to the data access. And that is a 7.0.13 for that version. And aside from this, we're going to install the EF Core itself. It's over here too. So let's install the EF Core. And we're going to install the tools so we can perform database migration against this data access. Now you're going to do the same thing to the API when we are done as well. So as after the successful installation of this first one, right click on the second one. That's going to be the API and also dependencies. Right click, and now let's go to manage NuGet packages. And now in here, we have to also install the same thing here. These three guys, we got to install them. We have to install the EF Core, design, and also the SQL server. So that is it. Let's install this, the API. Start from this, we have to install tools. So let's keep the tools because I'm not going to perform the migration here. Let's use the design instead. So install design here. And the last one, we're going to install SQL server. So we have the server installed. We have the EF Core itself. So let's have the EF Core itself. Okay, so that is this one. Let's install the EF Core. And we have to make sure we have the same EF code installed here. Did we install that here? We have it here set. Okay, now let's go in there and build the solution again to make sure these packages have been installed. So we installed these packages to 2 projects. So you can see we have 2 succeeded. Yeah, so that is it. We can just close this peacefully and we can start with our models. So this is going to be for practical purpose. So we're going to use employee and customer, and also we're going to use the order ID, right? So let's see. Now we're going to create all the models in the domain because that is what we're going to handle all the entities. So in here, what we can do is we're going to create a new folder and I'll name it as database entities. So let's do that here. We're going to handle all the models that we need. So new folder. Now database entities. Now the database entities, we're going to create some models. And the first one here is going to be customer. So let's add a class to that. So this is going to be customer. Now customer is going to have ID, going to have name. Then we're going to have location. Then customer is going to have orders. So one customer can order multiple products from the company. So we're going to have a list of companies. So one customer, multiple orders. One customer can order multiple items. Now let's get to that. I intentionally brought this list. This is a relationship. All right. So we can see how to work with it using the repository pattern, the generic repository pattern. Now let's go to the employee. Let's also create the employee here. So let's add a class and our employee. And now within that employee, you want to have simple 3 properties here. The ID as you know, the name as you know, and the address. So these are the properties that we need for this. The last part here is going to be the orders. So we're going to have an order table. And here we need to get it as order class. Now with this order class, you want to have access to the item name, the amount, and also the customer itself. So customer itself, you're going to make a reference to the customer ID because you have a customer table set already. So we don't need to store the customer name again. You want to just grab the ID and now store that. So we also create this relationship, and that's going to be like 1 to many, right? So one customer can have many many orders. One customer having many orders. But when you go to the others, one order, you can see, so multiple orders going to have one of what? This customer. So that is the relationship, one to many or many to one. Okay. But when you check this employee, you can see it has no relationship. That's the employee. It has no relationship. It stays idle. Yeah. All right. So we have this. Now, the next thing we're going to do here is we're going to create our generic repository. So that's our base repository. And that is what all the other repositories are going to base on. And I normally call it as mother repository. Mother. So it's going to house all the children. Mother repository. Now, before we do that, I want us to create a folder to make our work organized, because this is the production one. All right. Okay, so after this, we can just sell this, right? So let's say you're going to add a new folder to this. And let's say it is, let me just close up these spaces before it gets hyphenated. So generic repository interface. So this is just one that we're going to create here. So generic repository interface. And let's get it created. So we need to create an interface here. And now we're going to name it as iGeneric repository. So let's create, right click on the folder, add the new class, but it is not a class. Take note, it is what? Interface. So you make sure we pass in the iGeneric repository. And now within this, you want to have the following repositories here. So let me just grab this. And here we need to create that. Let me just remove this. Okay. So that is what we are doing. Our generic repository or our mother repository has to, or is going to perform the following method or processes. So we can just get the ID, we can get all lists, we can find, we can add, we can update, and we can delete. But you see, you are seeing some T in it, right? The T stands for the entity. And here the entity is referring to the database entity here, right? So a customer is going to be entity, employee is going to be entity, order is going to be an entity. So any of this, anytime that you want to call this, just passing the name of this model. And since here it is generic, it is dynamic, you can just fuse in here and now apply the same method to this model. Likewise, you can do the same thing to any other model here. So you can see we also have this find, and we have this expression as func, which means the function. We have the same entity, Boolean expression, and the predicate, or there could be a test or an instruction, right? Now here it is whereby you want to pass in a condition. So a condition find is where ID is equal to this, where name is equal to this, where this is equal to that, right? So you want to make a find from the whole list of this database, and I'm going to return a list. So it's like making a filter. So we're going to filter this using this one line here to make a query to that. All right, so this is what we need to do for our whole generic interface. Okay, so now we have this. The next thing to do here is we're now going to create a separate interface for each of the model. Now we have 3 models here. So we're going to create customer interface, employee interface, and our other interface. And these interfaces are going to inherit from the parent interface, and that is the iGeneric repository interface, right? So let's get that going. But first of all, I want us to create a folder and I'll put it in so we can have our work organized. Now, that is entity repository interfaces. So the name here tells you that it is about entity. So these entities, they are repository, right? Now let's get going. But first of all, what we're going to do here is we are going to create the employee interface. So let's make the name as iEmployee repository. So right click. Now let's add a class. I normally go for class, but we're going for an interface. Now let's give it a name as iEmployee repository. And we have to create same for the customer. So iCustomer repository. Let's do that. Then at the end, we create one for the order. So let's quickly do that. And we have the order repository. So you make sure you choose an interface here. Okay, so now we have this. This is what you're going to do. So when we go to the employee repository, here it's going to inherit from, so that's the employee, right? It's going to inherit from the parent repository. And now you pass in just the employee. So instead of this, you're going to say this is going to be public. And now let it inherit from generic repository. And now here, since it is employee, you're going to pass in the model as what? Employee. Very simple. That's all that you need to do. So here, in case we have any external method or customized interface that you want to add, you put it here. Don't worry, you get to that. Okay. So let's make a cleanup. Okay. So we have this. Let's go to the order. So with the order 2, we are going to do the same thing. And what we're going to do here is it's going to inherit from this generic. Then you pass in this order model. You can see this isn't difficult at all, right? It's very simple. Okay, so let's include this order. Now here must be public. We can make some small cleanup, remove this unnecessary users here, so we can have the interface in a cute form. Okay, so now let's go to the customer repository. Now with the customer repository, it's going to do the same thing, right? So making this cleanup first. Then here, generic, passing the customer. So not the customer, but rather customer. Okay, so here must be public. Okay, so you can see we're going to have the same method for all, right? So, but when it comes to this customer repository, you know, the customer has a relationship with the order. So this is what you want to do. Anytime that you want to get customer data, you want to also get the order data as well. But in that, you're not going to specify it in the general or the mother one because not all the models have that relationship. So in this case, you're going to make it as a private to it. Now, making it private here must happen down here because here we're talking about the customer repository. So all interfaces that you want to customize must be here. So first of all, you want to add one. And this, what you want to add, let's put it here as list of customer. And now here you want to return get customers with orders. Okay, so get customers at the same time, include and add orders to that. So you see here, it is a customizable one. We are customizing the interface, and this is different from the general one. Now with the general one, let's get into that and see. So we have this, and now we have the domain. So we have this, you have the interfaces here set. Now the last one that you need to create here, it is a unit of work. The unit of work must be an interface as well. What does the unit of work mean? As the name implies, it is a unit. So it unifies all. Instead of, you can see we are having 3 interfaces here. Now, if you know, if you've worked with interfaces and implementation class before, you know, anytime that you create your interface, you must create dependency injection by registering them in the program.cs file, isn't it? If you refuse to register them, what happens? It tells you that there's no registered service for that interface being used. So you have to register them. Now, let's say when you have a lot of interfaces, you have to register them one after the other by providing the entities in there. So in doing so, we can unify them by using the unit of work. So what you're doing here is we're going to register these interfaces inside the unit of work interface. Then we register the unit of work inside the program.cs file. So one for all, right? I keep saying it is one for all. One registration for this unified or the unit of work, and it gets across. It takes all the repository interfaces and the implementations that you've created in your project. So one for all. That is what it means, right? So now let's create that interface too. And right click on this, and now let's add this class. So here, going to be interface, and we say it is unit of work. Take note, it is an unit. So within this unit, it has to inherit from disposable. So we can dispose the connection as soon as we are done with it. Now, we don't need any of this. You can just close them or remove them from here. Okay, we save that. And I can see from here, we are creating the interfaces here we create and now we initialize this. So this is an instance of this. We are creating each and every model instances. Now here we can use save changes. We are not using async today. Maybe we talk about async later. So save changes, and that is the end changes. So this is going to return either 1 or 0, right? So 1 for success and a 0 for the not successful, right? Let's see, when we get to that, you're going to understand this well as well. But here is going to make a save to the database when make a call to each of the data using the model that have been specified here. Now here, the setter and our getter here, the data type that we are doing here is we are making only retrieval. We are not setting up only what retrieval from this interface that has been initiated here. I believe this is clear. That's right. So now we have this set. What we're going to do here is we are done with this domain. So you can see, as I mentioned earlier on, you've seen how to create an interfaces, a generic repository interface. And all these are happening in the domain project. Now let's go to the data access. And here, data access has a close connection with the database. So we put in only the services that have connection to the database, right? And that's going to be the implementation for these data from these interfaces, right? Okay. So I want to pause here, take in some water, and I'm going to return back soon. So please just wait for me. Or you want to also go and take in something, right? Okay, this is going to be a break time. Let's return within a minute. So I am back with good energy. Now let's move on to the second project, and that's the domain access. So let's create a folder for the implementation of the generic repository interface. So I'm going to create a folder here, and now let me name it as generic repository interface. Let's say not interface, implementation. So it is just only one. So let me make it implementation. Okay. Now the class name that we need to create here, it is the first one was iGeneric, right? So here it's going to be generic repository. So let's add a new class. And the class name is going to be generic repository, as you know. Let's click on. Now in here, we are going to create this. So let me just, it is just an implementation that you're going to do, right? So here, this is what you're going to do. It's going to inherit from the first one, and that's the interface. So you can see it is inheriting from the interface. Let's remove one. Let me just make some cleanup here. And you see, if I click on this generic here, it is accepting a T value. Okay, so that T value here is a class, and this is what we need to do. So aside from this, we are going to create a constructor here, and we need to implement this. So we can do something like control period. Let's implement the interfaces. So we have these interfaces being implemented. So to fix this T error, you know, this implementation here, it is also a generic. So we have to specify the T value here. Okay, now we have these interfaces. So first of all, this is what we're going to do. We're going to create a constructor and now inject our AppDB context, because you know this AppDB context contains all the databases that we have created. So control period, let's include this AppDB context class. But it seems like we haven't created this AppDB context class yet. So we can't have access to the method here. So quickly, let's get it done. Let's create a folder here. So let's pause this, right? Now we create a folder here and I'll name it as data. We're going to put in our AppDB context, and that's going to happen within here. So you can just make a copy of this. We create a class in the same data folder. So do that quickly and name it any name that you want. But mine is going to be the AppDB context. Now inside this class is going to inherit from the DB context class. So the DB context class, it is coming in from the EF core, that's the Entity Framework core. So you can see as soon as I do that, I have the namespace being added over here, and we have to create a constructor and pass in this option as the AppDB context, which is inheriting from this base class, and that's the DB context. So you can see we pass in the class name here, and it's inheriting from this base and passing this options here. Aside from this, we need to create our databases. So now we have 3 databases. So let's get it done. Down here, you can see we're using data set. Now here we set to default one. And now you can see we are using this model to create a database. The database, the name is employees, customers, and now others. It is using the properties in these various models to create a database columns. Now let's perform database seeding. Seeding means passing the default values. So you want to seed only this employee and not the customer. You know, this others here has a relationship with this, and we don't want to tackle this now, right? So let's have a look at this. Employee and non-customers, let's seed the data. So we can see the data, but first of all, overriding a method known as model creating. So when these models are being created, we want to also perform this simultaneously. So you can see we are checking if it has data, then skip. But if it doesn't have data, then put this in. All right. So this employee here has the data, right? And these are the data here. So let's fix it. Now this customer has the data, so fix it in here. So defaultly, when you run migration, we're going to have a table created, and the default values here are going to be set. So there's no need for us to set a default values manually. This is going to do it. Okay, so now we have this AppDB context kicking. Let's go to the generic repository, and now this is solved. So control period. Let's see. Now you're gonna have access to that. So we can peacefully include the namespace. We have the class injected. Okay, so we can now use this, right? So when I go back to this generic repository, the first one is to add. So add is just one line of code. We can just add it simple. Now let's put it over here. Or this is what we can do. We can just move all this. Then you point this arrow, and I will say appdb context.set t. So t is the entity or is the model dot add this entity. One line of code. We are done with that. Okay. Now the next one here, it is a delete. So the delete you're going to remove from the database. So let's also use this fat arrow expression. So that's a lambda expression. You see, we're also removing it. Very simple. All the time, you make sure that you have the set t, because set t here means it is a generic. It is a placeholder, right? So you're going to pass in a model name. Now let's go for this expression, and we're going to return that. So you can just make a copy here. Then with this, we can also use that fat arrow to handle this. Now let's see, we are returning this set where predicate, right? .toList. The reason why I added toList here, it is to see we are returning a list of t. So here could be just t. And if here is t, then we're going to use first or default, right? Or first to grab that data. But here we're returning a list because you see the type here, return type here is a list. Now, we want to also return all. So you can see from here that we are making an exception here. So we are passing in some values or some rules here to get what we want, but you want to return everything. So to do that, we can just also use the same fat arrow to make this simple. And you're going to see we pass it and return it .toList. So everything the data table that you're going to pass in with this t model, return everything. All right, so let's get to the get by ID. So if I want to get by ID, then we can use the find. So find, and now let's see. So fat arrow, then appdb context.set value, then find the ID that's going to be specified. And also from this, the update, you can also use same. So let's see. And it is just update. So that is all. So this is a generic implementation for the repository or the interface that we created. Now, what you're going to do here is we're going to create a various implementation for the various interfaces that we created for the models. Now, each model is going to inherit from this and also inherit from its interface. So it's going to inherit from the generic interface. That's the first one. And it's going to inherit from this generic interface. That's the first one, right? And also it's also going to inherit from the actual interface. It's its real interface. So for example, if you check here, you can see we have the interfaces here, right? So it's going to inherit from this interface and inherit from the other interface as well. Now let's get it done and see what I'm trying to say. So I'm going to create a folder here and I'll name it as repository or entity repository implementation. So I'm going to create a folder in the data access, click on add, new folder, And now entity repository implementations, let me add S. It's going to contain multiples. So the first one here is, let's create the employee repository, and this is going to be a class. So you put it here, then add a class, and this class is going to be employee repository. So in here, it's going to inherit from two interfaces. So the first one is going to be the generic one, that is this one that we created. And now this, you see, it since we added it was T. So when we check this generic, you see it needs a T value. So inheriting, we have to specify the T value. And in case we have any extra customized interface, it is coming from this employee repository. So you have to also inherit from that. Okay. Then we have this set, and it's inheriting from this. So you can see we create a constructor here. Then we're going to pass in this appdb context class, and it is inheriting from this context class, because this context class, is it a context? Because this repository here contains this appdb context. Okay. So you can see that you have this underlined, and it is saying that it is less accessible than the class of this. So generic repository is less accessible. Let's quickly check that and see. Whoa, so you can see that from here must be public. So let's set it done. Now when you go back, this must be off. So let's make some cleanup here. So as you've done for this employee, you have to do the same for the other ones as well. So let's go to the same thing. Let's create a customer repository class, and that's going to handle or going to come in from this section. So add a new class, and you know that's going to be customer repository. And now the customer repository, remember that in the interface we added the customized one. So here we have to implement the customized implementation. But first of all, it has to inherit from the parent repository and also its interface. So that's how you can see we have it here. All right, so some cleanup must be done. And now in this, we have to create a constructor, inject this appdb context, whilst you pass in to the base class as well. Okay, you know this is coming from the base. Now, in order for us to use this in this interface here, we have to initialize it. So that's why we initialize it here. Okay, now with the after initialization, we need to now write this, the customized interface that you specified. Remember that we have get customers with orders. When we check this iCustomer interface, so let's open the interface. So this is the interface here, iCustomer interface. You can see we have this list customer, and that is a get customers with orders. So we have to add implementation here. And here we could see we are including the orders table and return this list. So this is only limited to this customer repository. Let's have a look with the last one, and that is going to be the order repository. So with the order, we do not have any customized interface that we need to implement. So we just have to create only the default repository, and it must inherit from the parent repository and its interface that we created. And that is what we are doing here. You see? So let's make some cleanup. And that's all. So inheriting from this interface, that's his own, and I'm inheriting from this mother repository as well. Okay. So the last thing is, remember that we created this UnitOfWork interface, which linking all the interfaces together. So implementation must also be created, and let's do that. So our unit now class. So this is going to be a UnitOfWork. Remember that I said it's not an interface, so you don't have to add the I. Now within that, it has to inherit from the interface. I believe for this, you know how to do that, isn't it? Now, after inheriting it, you know, we have to implement some interfaces here. So to do that, we can just create this. Let's implement all the interfaces here. We have 3 interfaces that we need to implement. This must be public. Okay. Now with this, we have to also, it has one method that we need to create. Dispose and also save changes. So let's put that down here. So these are the methods coming in from that table. When you check this repository, that's the UnitOfWork, we have save changes. So we can just go in there, and now there's not save, it's save changes, right? Good. So we have it set these are the methods that we need, because when you check this interfaces here, it is the same that we need. So yeah, because we have this employee, we have customer, orders, and now this method. So it's the same thing that we have here. Now with this, before we do that, we have to create a constructor, inject our AppDB context, and initialize these repositories into this AppDB context, or pass in the AppDB context to that method. So you can see from here that this is an employee. We create a new instance, and now since it needs a parameter of this AppDB context, we have to create an instance of this by injecting this, initializing it here, and now pass it here. So you make sure that you don't put this beneath here, because you can't initialize it before you pass it. You must initialize it first before you pass it to this as a constructor. All right, now this is now saved. And as soon as you are done, you have to also dispose the AppDB context. So that's why we have this method created. I believe this is simple. So we are done with the data access, and we are done with this. Now what we're going to do here is we are going to have our settings done in the API and create or perform database migration and create a controller. Then that's going to be all. So let's save this, and we can now close this. We can close all the steps here peacefully. Yes, let's save them. Okay, so we have this set. The next thing to do here is we are going to create, let's work in the API. So let's have the database connection string in the app setting.json. So with that, we navigate to, let's close this API. Okay, and let's open the API. So we close the data access and now the domain class libraries. We open this app setting.json. And now in here on top here, we can specify our connection string. And here I'm going to say demo company DB. So demo company DB. Trusted connection we set to true, and also trust server certificate. We also set this to true. Data server, or the server here is a local host. Now we're done with this, we have to register our connection. So in the program.cs file, let's register the connection. So we're going to use builder.services.RDB context. We pass in a database context class, and here we're using this SQL server. Since we install EF core, we can use this SQL server, and we specify a connection string, that is the default connection from this app setting.json connection string name here. Now we are done with this. What we need to do here is let's register the UnitOfWork. So instead of registering all the interfaces with their correspondent implementation class, you can see we register all of them in the UnitOfWork, and now we have to register the UnitOfWork as a container. So this container here is going to create an instance of all of the interfaces that we created for the modules. So register it once, and that's all. So that's why we're using this transient. Now the next thing here is when you try to run this application, you're going to have some cyclic error events. The reason is when we check our modules, we have some relationship, and now that relationship, let's see data entities, it is happening between the customer and now the orders. This has a list of orders, and orders also has a customer, right? So it's going to rotate in such form. So to just stop or to just break this error, we're going to use these settings to register and ignore JSON cycle. So let's see. So we go to the same program, and now down here, let's use this line of code to ignore what cycles. So JSON ignore is going to skip that, and you can now go in and do what you want to do. So we are done with these settings. Now what we're going to do here is we have to perform database migration. So let's build this application first and see. So I click on this project and I'll click on build solution. Yeah, that is done. I believe yours is also done, isn't it? Now let's set, there's an API that has been set to default setup already, and that's what we see it is bold. So let's now come down here to package manager console. If you're not having yours, please go to tools, get package manager, and I'll click on this console. Now here, you make sure you do not select the API. You must select the data access, because that is where we have this AppDB context. So in here, we can add add as migration, then give it a name as first. Okay, so let's do that. And now this is going to be the project, and it's going to create this file for us. So let's wait. So you can see that we have a file created, and that is this file. You can see we have it first.cs. This is a file, and it contains all the tables that we have and the values that we want to set to the tables. So let's update the database. All right, so you can see it is done now. Now we have the database table created, and we have a default value seeded to the database table. Now, what we need to do here, the last thing, is to create our controllers. So we're going to create a separate controller for the employee, for the customer, and also for the others. Okay, but maybe we can create first two. The last one you can also create yourself, but because it is a matter of making a copy and paste and now changing the unit type. Let's have a look at this. So we go to the controllers folder, and now the very first one that we're going to create here is, let's create this employee controller. So we grab that, we go to controllers, right click on this, add a new controller, and you make sure you select an API and an empty one. And now the name of this is going to be this employee controller. So let's have it done. Now we have this. Let's create our constructor and now inject the UnitOfWork interface and create instance of this. So that's a constructor created. We inject our UnitOfWork. So this can be initialized here. So within this, we can have access to all the methods, because when you check the UnitOfWork here, we have access to all the methods. You're going to have employee, customer, others. And also we're going to have this method as save changes. Okay. So let's see. Now the next method that we are going to talk about here is going to be the getAll. So getAll method, and it's going to get all methods. So you can see we are having UnitOfWork.employees. So this is a repository that we are calling, and this has a method known as getAll. So in case I put on dot here, you can see you're going to have all the method here, right? Now, if I put this dot UnitOfWork, you're going to have all the interfaces here. So customer, employee, you can see others. So these are the implementation methods that we have, and they are coming from the interface that we created. Okay. Now that is to get all employee. Now to add, we need to use this HTTP post. So that is to add, and you can see we add it. After that, we save changes. This method contains save changes. So .save changes. So we call this method, right? So what this is doing here is, when you check this interface, that's the UnitOfWork, it has this method as save changes. You know, when you look at this employee, when you go to this, the data access, and now check this repository interface, or you can see that it has this AppDB context class injected. Now, when we add data to the database, we have to save that. But you see from here, we are not saving. So we create one instance here, and now it's going to apply to all. This is going to be a generic instance. So as soon as we add this, we can call that method. As soon as we delete, you can call that method. As soon as we update, you can also call that method. So that's the reason why we put that save here. So you can see here, we are saying that return appdb context.save changes, which is going to save the current operation done. I believe this is clear and understood. Thank you. Now let's keep going. So we have that. Now the next one is, and you can see here, it is returning, save changes is returning an integer. When you check this, the return type here is an integer. So we're going to have 1 as process succeeded successfully, and maybe 0 if it doesn't. Now the next one is, let's make some find up. So we're going to have this. Then we are passing in the string parameter of name, and we check. You see here, .find. So we pass in this expression. This is the rule. So find name, which contains this. The next one is, we can also specify get by ID by specifying the ID field. So this is also what we are doing. So get by ID, and you can see we have get by ID passing this ID, and that's the parameter that we are expecting. And the last two here, they're going to be the update and delete. So if I want to update and if I want to delete, what am I going to do? So with each method, you can see from here, we're making a delete. And now when you delete, we have to save it. So you can see we delete this employee, and now we save changes. Remember that here, it is not an async, it is just save. So we have to make changes to that. And I can see from here too, we are updating it. So we pass in the model that we want to update, and we call this method as update, and now we save changes. All right. So that is a way to create this employee controller. Let's add one controller to and see by creating this customer controller. Let's add it to that. So we go back to the same controller. Let's right click and I'll add a new one. And now here it is customers controller. So with the same customer controller, we're going to do the same thing. Okay. So I can just make a copy of this that we can just quickly run through. Okay, so that's what we have here. We create a constructor, inject our UnitOfWork, and at the same thing that we did. So here it is just save changes. So we get all, and here we are using just like here we are replacing the employee with customer, because we have employee, we have customer, we have others. So here we're using the customer, and add, we have name, so customer.find find employee. So here it's going to be find customer, right? So this is going to be find customer, and we can just replace this with all these employees name. So add customer, and we can do this. Okay, so we have them, find customer, delete customer, update customer, and like I said, anytime that you want to perform these operations, we have to also call the save changes, and now that is it. Now here, this action is coming from the customized interface, and they are not part of, it's not part of the general repo. Okay, so you can see here it is a get customer. Now here it is coming in from only this customer repository. Let's use this. So here, this I'm going to do. If I decide to UnitOfWork dot, we have others. Now others dot, it has the general one, because you're not having get customer with what others. Now if I use dot employees dot, you can see it has the same thing. It is not having the other ones. Now let's see dot customers or customer dot. Now you can see it has the customized method. So that's the reason why we implemented it inside this customer repository, this one. And we have the implementation over there in the customer repo too. And that's the reason why we can now have it in the controller and then call that method. Okay, so now we have this. We are going to run this project and see. So let's click on this to get this project run. All right, so you can see we have the data in here. Then we have all the customers, we have all the employees here. Now the customer has a external one over here. Now the employee has not. Now let's click on get all customers. So try this out. And you're going to have access to all the customers because you have a default values seeded when creating database migration. Now you can see we have it set here, and we have also this. We can also get the same from the employee too. Let's see. We also have this. Now let's check it up. Let's go to the employee, right? And now let's try to add an employee. So here, post, we have this employee, right? That's a string. Let's try to add that. So try this out. Now if I click on execute this, it's going to return 1, meaning successfully executed. When you click on get employee, let's see. So now we have 1, 2, 3. We're going to have the fourth one. So fourth one, we see we have it set here. We can also delete the same employee with the ID. So let's delete it. So we can delete it by first. We can just grab this. Then let's go to the delete. And now it is, let's try this. It needs a model. So let's pass in this. The ID is 4. Click on delete, and it must return 1. Now let's go in there and now fetch the whole data. And you can see, okay, so this is post. Let's delete again. So execute this. Okay. Now let's check it out from the get list to execute. All right, so we still have the ID here. I want us to minimize this so we can see it well. So no post. Now, if I get all employees, okay, so it's still running. So clear this out, execute this. Oh, okay. So you can see that we have the number 4 being deleted. Now let's go to the database here and let's try to add the others table. Let's try to add data so we can make a query here now and get that data. So in here, go to database and there's a demo company DB. That is this one. So tables, and now I'm going to open the other tables. So that is the order. Right click and now view data. Okay, so you can see we have an ID. Let's add item name, maybe desktop, computer, then amount. Let's have any amount here. Then customer ID is 1. Okay, we can have the next one as maybe laptop. Then amount, have any amount. Then ID is 2. Now let's save this. And now let's go to the API. And now let's see. So now we are going to customers. Now let's click on customers with orders. So try this out. And now we have 2 orders related to customer ID of 1 and 2. So you can see customer ID of 1, it has this order. Customer ID of 2, it also has this order. Customer ID 3 has no order. So that's why you can see we have this now. So we have a generic repository, but it also supports relationship. And that's a relational database as well. All right, so today, what have we captured today? We've seen how to create a generic repo, how to create generic implementation, how to create UnitOfWork, how to join them together, how to register them, how to inject and use, and how to create our API controllers, and now make these methods available for user. That is it for this video. Thank you so much for watching this, and also make sure you subscribe to this channel as well. Check the description, and all the necessary information that you need is going to be put there for you. You're going to have access to the repo too as well. Thank you. Take care of yourself, and I'm going to catch you up in the next video.